I would like to introduce to you our guest speaker. Her name is Bettina Hausmann, and she is the president and chair of the board of directors at the United Nations Association of San Diego. And she is actually joining us today on vacation. And so we're really honored that she's taken time out of her vacation schedule to share with us a few words. So Bettina, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Dana, and Laura Nana from the French Polynesia. You're probably wondering what is the connection between the UN Association in San Diego and Feeding San Diego. The association, so our association, is a US initiative that established itself after the World War II, and through visionaries such as Truman and Roosevelt, where in San Francisco in June 1945, the Charter of the United Nations was signed. And that was also the birth of the UN associations. We are fully volunteer, a civil society organization, nonpartisan, and membership. So we bring really the importance of the work of this international community, the United Nations, to our local communities. And particularly in San Diego, as one of the oldest in the world, we were established in 1946. We're promoting engagement with the United Nations. We have now more than 150 chapters in the United States and over 100 representations in countries around the world. We specifically connect the international agreed upon concepts when we're talking about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, trade agreements worldwide, and initiatives. We're connecting these with local governance. So how that works is truly we're functioning as the local ambassadors to and for the United Nations by translating these global matters into local context to showcase its local impact and applications. So that's just about our chapter and what do we do in San Diego. So the question is really, what are these global concepts currently that we are focusing on? And that is over the past 7 years, we're working on the implementation and raising awareness really on the Sustainable Development Goals, also called the Agenda 2030. And these Sustainable Development Goals were born out of what is arguably the most inclusive process in the history of the United Nations. They reflect substantial input from all sectors of society. That means really civil society and private sector, plus the usual attendees such as heads of states and heads of countries around the world. In 2012, I was lucky and fortunate enough to be in Rio de Janeiro at this very historic moment where we are all collectively as the world agreed upon these Sustainable Development Goals that really include all countries around the world as one understanding of we are one humanity and we have therefore a shared responsibility. It's a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all, and an ambitious agenda to leave no one behind, accomplished by 2030. Hence the name Agenda 2030. It is a set of 17 goals, as I mentioned, 17 objectives. So an aspiration, a real commitment to address our challenges. Each goal, as you can see, 1 till 17, is broken down into a number of targets. And there are a total of 169 targets that really are an action, a specific, measurable, and time-bound outcome. Each target in itself is also measured through one or more indicators, 230 in total. And that really is accountability, meaning it's a metric to measure progress. So we have 17 goals, we have 160 targets, and 230 indicators. These 17 goals are also really organized or categorized in 5 overarching areas: people, planet, partnership, prosperity, and peace. And they are designed for global action in each country around the world. They are universally applicable In developing and developed countries, so meaning also in the United States, governments are expected to translate them into national action plan, policies, initiatives, reflecting the different realities and capacities their countries possess. While primarily target governments, these sustainable development goals, could we move to the next? Perfect, thank you. This is another way of showcasing these sustainable development goals in a wheel to really show the interconnectedness. Mentioned that they primarily target governments. They're also designed to rally a wide range of stakeholders to shape priorities and aspirations for sustainable development efforts around a common framework. So that's where Feeding San Diego comes in as well, and cities around the world that adopt them. For instance, New York, Los Angeles, and just recently, we were able to work with the city of San Diego to implement their annual CAP report, which is a climate action plan report from 2019. This year, they incorporated for the first time the sustainable development goals to really measure against these efforts. And Feeding San Diego in itself is truly our champion in terms of localizing these ambitious goals. In addition to the city of San Diego, Feeding San Diego was truly our first partner in this effort to showcase how local actions fit into this global agenda. And with that, particularly with zero hunger, which is the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, you can see end hunger, achieve food security, improve nutrition, how it fits into what Feeding San Diego does, as well as the SDGs number 12, thank you very much, responsible consumption and production, that particularly really promotes sustainable business practices and consumer behavior. We addressed with Feeding San Diego in its work climate action, the SDGs 13, such as with the climate controller badge that Feeding San Diego has in partnership with San Diego Girl Scout and other local partners implemented to really raise awareness on food rescue that is no longer going into landfill, hence really not contributing to more to our climate warming. We have SDGs 17, which is partnerships. That really is what Feeding San Diego does with the different grocery stores, with the different partners that they are collaborating in their efforts of really eradicating hunger. And these strengthen together domestic resource mobilization that is really so crucial in the success of achieving our 2030 agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals. So in our capacity as the ambassador to and from the United Nations in our local communities, we were really excited in partnering with Feeding San Diego, particularly to raise the awareness of its climate controller badge, as mentioned earlier, as one of the examples, with the United Nations, with the international community. And we were glad to have our colleague and a good friend of the chapter, Satya Tripathi. He's the UN Assistant Secretary General for the Environmental Program in New York City, record a thank you message and an endorsement of this climate controller badge to Feeding San Diego, to our community, a shout out. And I'm sure that Dana had hopefully shared this with you within an e-blast, this thank you message. If not, it's on YouTube. We're really particularly excited about making that connection. Furthermore, we, with these combating hunger, malnutrition, it's really a moral duty or a policy choice in many countries. And here, of course, it is legally binding by the human rights obligation. We were excited in partnering with Feeding San Diego for this this September initiative, and particularly as we brought in Ford Roosevelt, who's the grandson of Eleanor Roosevelt, one of the biggest champion of our chapters, and now with Ford Roosevelt continuing this legacy in champion our chapter in San Diego. He endorsed the campaign for the, particularly based on the understanding on his grandmother's efforts in bringing about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as the right to food is recognized within this document, and a right to an adequate standard of living as it enshrined in 1966 International Covenants on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So it really is something that we felt strongly we want to bring Fort Roosevelt in to get the endorsement for the September campaign of Hunger Action Month that is so important, crucially important for the, next slide please, for not only San Diego, but really connecting what is done in the United States, how it connects back with the bigger picture on eradicating hunger. It's not out there in the world, it's also here in our own homes, in our yards. So we truly recommend commend Feeding San Diego on its effort to help end hunger. And we're proud partners, and particularly in heightening the visibility of its contribution to reaching the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, as mentioned, these four aspects that are really touched by their work. This year, we joined Feeding San Diego for its Hunger Month in mobilizing the community to end hunger, and we hope that we will do so in the coming years, and really delivering on the universal promise on the Sustainable Development Goals to leave no one behind, and achieving a true prosperous and sustainable world for 2030. In addition to Fort Roosevelt and the UN Secretary General of the United Nations Environmental Program, Tripartite, we also have asked UN 75 department at the UN. This year, we're celebrating 75 years of the United Nations and the international community there is. And we have partnered with UN 75 to bring about a message of visibility and acknowledgement and encouragement, really, for continuing efforts by Feeding San Diego through its not only the month of September, but truly its work in itself. And it coincides really with the United Nations commemoration of the Global Week that starts, Global Goals Week, that starts September 18th through the 26th. And that's also a week of action and awareness on accountability on the Sustainable Development Goals. And again, really making that connection. These are global goals, but we do need to start in our local communities, and it applies to us. And Feeding San Diego is truly the one representing and champion and being exemplary for these initiatives from the local to the global, how we really need to raise our compassion, but also how we need to understand our world by being really interconnected, as we have agreed up in 2015 by implementing the Sustainable Development Goals in each country of the world. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope you feel proud of being part of Feeding San Diego's effort, as it's truly one of a kind, and we couldn't do it without them. Thank you.